So I believe we're live from Nashville, Tennessee, OLC Innovate. As Clarissa jumps into the room, I'll just make sure I got Clarissa muted. So we're just going live now. I'm going to let Autumn kick off our virtual connection. We have Michael Berman here as our guest, but he's not on site. It's a on-site guest that's virtual. That's the thing we're going from OLC Innovate. I'll let Autumn introduce herself, and then I'll go around the group here and then end up with Michael. Go ahead, Autumn.
Hey, everybody. My name is Autumn Keynes, and I'm an instructional designer at St. Norbert College. And I'm actually here on site at OLC Innovate. I'm the only person in the room who is actually on site, but it's great to be here. It's great to be talking to all of you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. Hi.
So we'll go George next.
Okay, hi, I'm George Station. I teach at Cal State Monterey Bay in obviously the Monterey area in California. And we are here today with my first year seminar class. It's FYS 156, Technology and Society theme, meets a social science GE. And I'm saying all that to keep us out of trouble with the university, but also to kind of plug the university that they would support such a class in the first place as a GE class, and that's appreciated. And my students actually also participated in the engagement in a time of polarization MOOC that ran in February this semester, and I wanted to just give a shout out for that if anybody remembers 2 months ago when we were, some of us I think in the session today were also in that MOOC, so I wanted to mention that.
Wonderful, thanks George. And Greg?
Hey, this is Greg. I'm an instructional technologist in the Boston area. It's been a while since I participated with Virtually Connecting, but I'm excited to see everyone again and to hear about how the conference is going.
Laura. You're muted up.
Yeah, there we go. My name is Laura. Like George, I teach gen ed. I teach online for the University of Oklahoma. I live in North Carolina, and I grew up in Nashville. So I have to say, home of Hillsborough High School, home of the mighty Borough, go Burrows.
Thanks. And Susan? You'll have to unmute.
Yep.
There.
My name's Susan, and I'm actually from St. Norbert College as well. I'm an ESL instructor, and I also teach international students, undergraduate students. The other thing that I've been working on, and actually with Autumn, is our virtual reality room and working with faculty and staff and students and aligning with the course objectives.
And Rissa?
Hi, everyone. My name is Clarissa Sorensen Unruh, and I'm a chemistry instructor at the CNM at Central New Mexico Community College. I'm also a UNM graduate student in statistics and learning sciences. And I did the Engage MOOC, and now I'm a VC buddy. So I'm part of trying to figure out what this whole thing is and how to do it better. Okay.
One of us. And I believe Kristen and Annie wanted to say hi.
Hey, yes. Hi, I'm Annie Sadler. I'm the Digital Learning Fellow at Davidson College and was actually part of the course team that created Engagement. So it's really exciting to hear for other people that were a part of it. And this is Kristen.
Oh, hi, I'm Kristen Eshelman. I'm Director of Digital Innovation at Davidson. I work with this one.
So these guys were just sitting right over there when you guys were talking about all the engagement stuff. And so I was just like, hey, you guys, come on.
This is how we roll. And I'm Ken. I'm here in Guadalajara. I work at Tecnológico de Monterrey in our Guadalajara campus and do a lot of this virtually connecting, but I'll pass it on to Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Berman, and I'm on the Diversity Inclusion Committee. We can talk about how it is that the one white guy in the Diversity and Inclusion Committee ends up being the spokesperson for it. But actually, in a way, it's kind of cool. I'm very happy to be here and happy to represent the work of that group, and looking forward to our conversation. I'm here in Long Beach, California, where I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the Technology Division of the California State University's Office of the Chancellor, or as George and his colleagues know it, the Death Star. So, pleasure to be here with you.
Great. So I'm going to throw it really open. Where do we want this conversation to go? We talked a little bit at the beginning. I didn't know where you wanted to direct this, either Autumn or Michael. I'm just pushing buttons on my end.
I would start with kind of a reflection on being a virtual attendee at a conference, and I'd be really interested if Susan or any others who are at this conference, or any of you have experience being virtual attendees at another conference, could chime in. I think this is it's an unsolved problem. How do you really have virtual attendees at a conference? And OLC is I know is very interested in trying to make strides in it, but there's a long, long way to go to really involve virtual participants and make them feel like they're participating in a conference. You know, I was approached a year ago and asked to be on the committee, on the diversity inclusion members are also members of the steering committee, and I was asked by Angela and Gunder and Jess Knott, and I can hardly think of, there aren't too many people I would just never say no to, but when Angela and Jess asked me if to do this, I was just like, okay, well, if Angela and Jess are asking me, I'll do it. Sounds great. And then when I heard Chris was going to be involved, and I didn't know Kate Zonka, but it was originally the three of us. It's been great people to work with. But I knew from the beginning that I wasn't going to be at the OLC conference this year. And the reason is that in the state of California, we have a state law that restricts the travel of California state employees to, originally it was 4 states, and now it's 8 states in the union, because of regressive social policies in those states, and Tennessee is on that list. Personally, I have really mixed feelings about that law. The intention is really good, but whether California can really change the social policies of other states by having us not go to those states, I'm not sure how effective that really is. But regardless of that, that's the restriction that I'm under. I do know that there are some people in California who did go to the conference, but the way I read the law and the restrictions, there was really no way I could justify going. So yeah, North Carolina is one, Texas, Kansas, Mississippi. I don't have the whole list, but I can tweet it out later. But you know, I'm not sure it makes the world a better place if people who work for the state of California don't go to Tennessee. But I understand the idea that we don't want tax dollars supporting businesses in states that have policies that people in California don't agree with. But be that as it may, I knew I wasn't going to be there face to face, and so I thought this was a chance to participate virtually. And I've always been really interested in virtual participation in conferences. In fact, April and I, oh God damn it, I call her April, and I just swore on YouTube. How about that? Autumn and I'm always like one step away from calling her April. I don't know why, because she's so sunny or something. But Autumn and I presented virtually at the conference, and we talked about how you encourage virtual participation and the opportunities for virtual participation, how it allows people to participate who otherwise wouldn't have a chance to participate. But it's really challenging. I don't think any conference that I've seen has really incorporated virtual participants in a very meaningful way. I do think that the OLC live Zoom room that they're doing is pretty good, actually, and I hope that a lot of the virtual participants go on that and participate in it, because it's really pretty cool. But you know, like I found out that a bunch of people went out for bluegrass music and Thai food last night, and I didn't get to do that. You know, I guess I could have gone out by myself to get Thai food, and then I could have listened to bluegrass on Spotify or something, but it's just not the same. So there's so much about a conference that goes beyond watching presentations, that has to do with all the social interaction that you have. And of course, virtually connecting has always been about trying to build that kind of social connection, and the things that it's kind of virtualizing the hallway conversation that happens after someone speaks. And I mean, maybe we're expecting virtual participation to do something that it can't do, but you know, when you consider how hard it is for people to travel, when you consider the environmental impact every time you get on an airplane, which is pretty extreme and pretty negative, when you consider that people have family obligations, they have work obligations, they have health reasons why they can't travel, they have financial reasons why they can't travel, virtual participation seems like something that we really ought to be putting more energy into. And so I'm really interested, and I'd be really interested in anyone in the group that if you've had like a great virtual participation conference, I'd really like to hear about that, because I want to hear about how we can make that possible. So I'll stop there. Ken, I don't know if you have any other questions, or people in the group have questions. I could talk a little more about the committee too.
I think George Station has a question.
George.
Yeah, Michael, since you're in Long Beach at the Death Star, my question for you is about that aspect that you mentioned, which is you didn't feel comfortable physically traveling to one of those 8 states, right? And I guess they're mostly southern states, and that's a different conversation. But California's got a list, and we know there are people from California there. So my sense is that, my reading of it is that people can still go, but they can't do it on the state dime. So in other words, California taxpayer dollars cannot support the travel to any of those states. And you're not really costing the state anything by sitting in your office in Long Beach and being in this session, for example, and nor am I. It's saving my students from a lecture from me today, but that's about the only, thing that I guess somebody over in HR could say that, I got a free hour here where I wasn't, quote, teaching or something, right?
Well, that's a whole other.
Exactly. But do you have like comments on how people can work with the regulations without, maybe breaking down interstate relations or whatever?
Sure. Well, there's no question I could take time off and go anywhere I want, anywhere they'll let me in, which would presumably at this point still includes all 50 of the U.S. states, as well as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. But and I believe that some people may have traveled to the conference as state business, specifically because Merlot has this long relationship with the conference, and there are exemptions, although I didn't really see, I'll be interested to talk to those folks and see how they did it. I mean, maybe they took time off and used Merlot dollars to pay for it. I don't know. But I was told by some people, oh, it's not really the problem. You can get an exemption. But I read the rules for what constitutes an exemption, and I didn't think that I qualified for any of them. But yeah, it's kind of, we've now identified these certain states and put them off limits. And I know that the legislators, they're living in their world. They're not really thinking about things like intellectual exchange between people from different parts of the country, and what is the value or the cost of not allowing California academics to be visiting other states. It's a big issue for sports teams too, right? So it's really messed with the plans for some of the California sports teams, because they're not supposed to go, even though they have, in some cases, they have contracts or they have obligations through their sports conferences that they belong to. So, but I'm not sure that I got the gist of what your question was, George. But yeah, that's just that's just the reality. And I thought, actually, well, this is a good opportunity to try to do something different, try to participate virtually, because I know I'm relatively privileged. It's easy for me to get budget. If I say I have a need to go to a conference, I generally can go. My little children are pretty much grown up. I don't have to take care of them, and I'm lucky to have good health. But there are lots of people who can't go to conferences. Often financial is the limitation, but it could be mobility, it could be all kinds of things. And so being sensitive to that, and really what a privilege it is to go to a conference face to face, virtual opens that up to a broader group of people, and many times people who are disadvantaged and aren't able to travel for various reasons. So that's part of why I'm so interested in it. Looks like Laura has a question.
Can I go ahead and ask? There we go. I was really struck by something that I think Keegan put up, or Keegan had shared from OLC, of all kinds of opportunities of conversations, not just for necessarily people not on site, but even people on site who are trying to connect. They had some Flipgrid set up. They're using lots of different kinds of Twitter hashtags, all kinds of things that looked really good. And I was interested in that because this summer Instructure has asked me to help them with InstructureCon to see if there's some things like that we could do there, because I had said, you know, I tried to follow virtually last summer. Some things worked, some things didn't. How could we do better? And I was really impressed. And Instructure said, hey, yeah, you could help us with that. And they invited me to come to the conference, which was amazing because I don't have travel support from my school. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to be on site, and I'm looking for ideas that work. So I'm curious, Michael and Autumn and anybody else, did you participate in some of those other alternatives like the Flipgrid, or how's the Twitter been? What's been working for you all?
Yeah, well, I'll just start and then see if other people have comments. I think it's like all communications today, you have to do lots of different things. So for example, for people who use Twitter, Twitter is great, but that's what, I don't know, 20%, there's, you know, 10 or 20% of even the population of people who are familiar with EdTech are like regular Twitter users, right? And so for that group, that's great. And I just saw tweets from Keegan and other people. Ken tweets a lot. You know, for that group, that's great. But that misses a huge swath of the population who, for whatever reason, just doesn't use Twitter. They're not used to using Twitter. I went to the Flipgrid site and I was kind of like, because I never used Flipgrid. I was like, okay, it looks like a bunch of statements of different things. I'm not really sure how to get in there, and I don't have time right now. Maybe I'll go back to it later. But if Flipgrid is what you use, then that's great. There's Slack channels this year, so there's stuff going on in Slack. We have the video, but of course the challenge is for those people who have to curate the content. It's all over the place. So like, how do you simultaneously involve people in video, Flipgrid, Slack, Twitter? You know, what other things that they're doing? And I assume Canvas probably has some of its own proprietary tools they would like you to use, and so you probably have a Canvas site and put things in Canvas. That's a real difficult problem that we don't have solved. I mean, and I'm dealing with the same thing at the Chancellor's office in my new role, because I want to communicate with the campuses. So what is the right way to communicate with the campuses? Okay, so we've all used listservs, right? Well, I don't really like listservs. I'd rather not use listservs. But if I don't communicate with listservs, I've lost a whole swath of my audience, right? And so we're starting to use Slack. That's great. But again, what percentage of the folks are going to use Slack? And I can tweet, but that only reaches 5 or 10% of my intended audience. You know, I think I'll skip Facebook. You know, you know, and then we can put things on a blog. Yeah, 57 channels. That's a great 57 channels and nothing on. Yeah, great reference in the chat. So it's a really hard problem we have right now, right? I mean, it's the same as, you might call it like the newspaper problem, right? It's like if you were the mayor of a city, you put out a press release, it goes in the newspaper. That's how you communicate to everybody, because everybody reads the newspaper, right? Well, maybe that was sort of true, depending how you define everybody. Maybe that was sort of true 40 or 50 years ago, but it's not true today. Oh, and Nate mentioned IRC. That was really funny, because I went to one of the virtual sessions and they had chat for it, and I clicked to start the chat. I was like, oh my God, I'm in IRC. I feel like I've gone back in time. I want to send someone a fax to tell them about it. You know, but you know, IRC still works. It's just like Slack with an old-fashioned interface. So, I thought George was asking me how old I was, but yeah. But yeah, it's a really hard problem, and I guess that's the problem with virtual conference too, right? You want to bring everyone in. You can't really say, okay, here's this new spiffy tool. Everybody download this, and we're going to do all our communication this. You just lost 2/3 of your audience right there.
Right.
And then it's like, well, it doesn't work in my browser. It doesn't work on my machine. I'm trying to connect. I'm Meha in Egypt, and half the time my internet doesn't work or the power's out, so I'm using my cell phone to connect, right? Does it work on my version of Android that I've got in Egypt? If I want to include everybody, then I'm trying to include that person too. And, you know, how does Flipgrid work on a small cell phone? I have no idea. So
how many participants? How many people are virtually connecting connecting virtually right now to the conference?
You know, I don't know. That'd be a good question to ask Susan. And I have no idea really, but I also know that there are like accounts and there are people. So I'm sure that some of the participants in the conference are actually like a teaching and learning center or a technology center. And they've signed in for the conference and they're running the sessions, you know, in a lab or in a meeting space for faculty or something. And so then there could be many people who might come in and watch one session and then walk out. And so I mentioned Zoom. I'm a big fan of Zoom, but again, we've discussed we use Zoom for virtually connecting, but unless you pay for it, you only get 45 minutes. And virtually connecting's ethic is this kind of DIY ethic that says we want to use tools as much as possible, and they're free to anybody so they can copy what we're doing and they don't have to spend any money. And by the way, the parts of the world where Zoom doesn't work very well. Of course, we're using Google Hangout, not very good if you're in China. Basically, or completely 100% excluded. So it's a fascinating problem. I think this it's like we have the greatest possibilities for communication in the history of the world, and yet we still can't talk to each other.
Susan, were you trying to jump in there?
Well, I guess, yeah, I was wondering, like, if we were going to ask George's classroom, the students there, if we were going to connect with the students, what would they choose to use to connect?
Let's find out. So what would you use to do something like this? We're using Google Hangouts, but what would you all really use if I wasn't here, like in class, telling us we're all doing a Hangout, right? I think, is that the question, Susan? Is that fair? Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe a few of us could say what we would really use in the video conferencing we really do in real life. That isn't this. But let's see. Sebastian always likes to kick off. We're letting Sebastian kick off. We're going to maintain class protocol, right? And so go for it, Sebastian, and then Kat, you want to jump in after that? Great, thank you, Kat.
I know for me personally, I use Google Hangouts for part of our National Residential Honorary. I'm sure maybe some of your colleges have that. It's an honor society. So I'm always connecting with people from Vermont and other East Coast schools. So that seems to be the way we communicate all over the US through Google Hangouts. So that's what I can say for me personally.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Skype or Discord work very well.
Skype or Discord? Did everybody get that? Okay, more? Others? Yes. Zoom. You're a Zoom user.
Well, sometimes.
Okay. Is that the free version of Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got kind of a time limit. I think Michael mentioned a time limit if you are in there forever. Okay. Okay, and the other one, I think you said FaceTime.
Yeah.
So.
That one comes with your
okay, so. Yeah, so the iOS people can use FaceTime as well. Any others?
But if I will say, this time only lets you connect with one person.
Yeah.
Unless you get the fan app that connects to
Oh.
your iPhone.
Okay, so we're learning about new apps to get broader connectivity within the class. So we just learned something about FaceTime that the whole class didn't know. So this is a great question. Any other?
What was that, George? Because we couldn't hear the answer.
Okay, so there is an app called, is it FAM?
Yeah.
FAM, that FAM, that is a FaceTime add-on that allows more than one person in that FaceTime call. So sounds like we got a winner on that one for sure. Any others? Any other video technologies that we want to toss out there? Albert, yeah.
There's stuff called
WeChat. Okay, that's great. And does that have to do with the Google limitations sometimes, or not really? But it's just a preferred, you think?
Yeah.
Among your peers, maybe preferred. Yeah. Okay, WeChat, and we'll add that in. Any others? Okay, great. Thank you, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in for a second because I got Annie here, and if those of you who did Engage MOOC might recognize Annie because she was a part of that. And am I remembering correctly that that's like you weren't doing much with like networked communities and stuff like that before that? That was
No, I actually joined Twitter over the course of Engage MOOC. I am a complete digital lurker. I am there to like observe and watch, and just recently, actually with Sunday Richard. Pushing me to kind of interact and to try and digitally connect. And I find it really challenging for me to connect digitally just because I'm so much more practiced in face-to-face. And so something that actually that Autumn and I were just talking about was the value of the conference. Like, is the value the centrality of it all, just that everyone's in the same space, the same time zone? And so even if you have many different activities going on at the same time, everyone's in the same kind of confined space. And if that is the value of the conference, does there need to be like an equally centralized virtual space instead of having all these different spaces?
I think that's a great question, you know, and it's really interesting to me, especially when I think about engagement, because engagement used a lot of different tools, right? It didn't have a central, well, I guess, what was the platform?
edX.
Yeah, you guys had a platform. But you did skip around, you did open it up, you did allow for other, and I feel like it's almost like it's a bit of like, yeah, you can design for it to be in one place, but I think especially if you have people who have, they're maybe higher on the end of with digital literacy, so they know how to use these tools, but they're also maybe on a higher end of like social digital literacy, right? Where they know how to use Twitter, they interact in those ways a lot of times. It's hard to confine those people, right? They will break out of the platform and start dabbling in all of these other different places. So I feel like we might be frozen. Are we frozen? Okay, I think we're back.
I got you.
No, you're good. We heard all that. That's fine.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I think that was just about all I had to say. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Well, I have just 5 minutes before I have to go, because I'm doing another virtually connecting after this, where I'm going to be taking Ken's role and I have to get set up for it. But I just want to go back to diversity and inclusion, because we ended up talking all about the virtual, which I do think is related, but I'm just curious if anyone has any questions about that. We did have a discussion earlier, and I know one of the things we talked about was whether diversity and inclusion is properly a committee, or if it's a real change in culture for the whole organization, which is not the same thing as a committee. But if anyone has any questions about that and what we tried to do there, I'd be interested to hear from you.
George?
Yeah, because we are struggling with diversity and inclusion issues on our campus. We've got an overall kind of equity plan for our campus, which is fine, but it's one of those things that you do because you do that. Nobody knows about it really, except people who have an inherent interest. We've had issues with ethnic studies on our campus and throughout the CSU, with a couple of exceptions, but definitely on our campus, we have a nascent ethnic studies program. So we have all these issues of diversity and inclusion where a committee does not seem like the only solution, but it's got to be part of the solution. We've got one college here that decided that the campus committee wasn't enough, and they started their own. And hopefully something will bubble up from that. We're a younger campus. Younger means like 20-some years old in the world of universities, right? But we know what we haven't done yet to basically support all our students and all our staff and all our faculty, but we're having trouble shifting gears to make sure that we actually do that. So I'm wondering if anything emerged, you know, from the earlier conversation that would help us get off the stick a little bit, I guess.
Well, I think one of the interesting things for me was having Kate Saka involved, who's an expert in universal design for learning, and thinking about the relation between diversity and inclusion, which we usually think is either about gender or about ethnic characteristics, and looking at that through the lens of universal design for learning, I think has been really interesting, because we certainly define inclusivity to be about the people who you know, Kate serves on her campus, or people with different abilities. And it's interesting to think about that. And then also in relation to virtual, right? So it's like, if you think about virtual participation in most conferences, it means you can sit in the back of the room, literally sit in the back of the room and watch, right? You're gonna see a screen and you're gonna watch a PowerPoint presentation, and maybe you can ask a question, but you're literally not in the room. It's almost like you're sitting up in the balcony. And so those three, I'm kind of fascinated by. Obviously, there are huge differences as well, but there's some parallels between the diversity in the sense of gender or ethnicity, diversity in the sense of people with different abilities, but then also being remote or being physically in a space. So we kind of had discussions about all that, but one of the main things that we realized is that this has to be a year-round effort. That, for example, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee didn't meet until after the call for papers had gone out. So we never had a chance to, I would have loved to bring in an expert on implicit bias to read the call for papers and give us suggestions for how we structured the call for papers to assure that we weren't unintentionally excluding people that we wanted to bring to the conference. So we never really had a chance for that conversation. We were too late. So I hope next year that, you know, just the way, even the way you describe Nashville to people could either perhaps be inclusive or not inclusive. You know, when I did the virtual tour of Grand Ole Opry and what it looks like, I think, frankly, it looks like a Southern plantation. That's not a message that's inclusive to every audience. And so thinking about how do we push back against that and say, you know, yeah, we're in Nashville, but Nashville is more than just white people singing black country music and things that look like plantations, right? There's a lot more nuance there that we could have a conversation about. And I think those are real important issues. And they just go way beyond what a committee of 3 or 4 people can deal with.
I'm pretty much leading open mic, so if you have something you want to add, folks, jump in.
Now, I just had a question about this session. Because we're the CSU, we have our rules about video, and I'm breaking a couple of them today. And I'm wondering about this very session with our 2 CSU people in it, you know, and the fact that if we really want people to access this later, you know, if we're not captioning, not all VC sessions, but like this one that has actual CSU people in it, what do we do about that, right? I know some of its resources. YouTube auto captioning is pretty shabby, but we got to do something to make sure that we are not just talking about being inclusive when we're really not being inclusive. So
yeah, the ironies just abound, don't they? You know, we had that discussion earlier about that none of the OLC stuff is currently being closed captioned, not live or afterwards. And I think that's something I think it's going to be a strong recommendation from the Diversity and Inclusion Committee that's something OLC simply has to materials. OLC definitely can afford to close caption materials. Virtually Connecting is a tougher one because we have no budget. I mean, we're strictly a volunteer operation, but I don't want to make that an excuse. I think we need to take that back to Virtually Connecting and have another discussion about that, figure out a way that we can start captioning our materials. Because we put them all out on YouTube, and other than for YouTube captioning, which is some people have suggested is pretty bad, we're probably not doing what we need to do. So I think it's a good challenge for those of us in Virtually Connecting.
We have actually addressed that, and we've had closed captioning groups before that have gone through and use the YouTube just as a starting place, and then gone through and done it all. Actually, Rebecca and Brittany and someone else, I can't remember, they actually did a Virtually Connecting blog post on that as well. It's just a matter of time and energy, really, because we're volunteer based and because we don't have any money whatsoever, it's a difficult thing for us to keep up with. But we do make an effort toward it, and we do know that it's something that we have to. It's something we've thought about. We've definitely thought about it.
Okay, I'm gonna jump off. Thank you all for a great conversation, and I think there are still slots if or you can watch the live feed of the next conversation, which is going to be Kristen and Romy Ruckel, who's from somewhere in Boston. I forget which. I think she's at University of Massachusetts, but I'm probably getting it wrong. And we're
Boston University.
Boston University, which is a totally different place. And we're going to talk about a meeting that Annie was also at. That was at Channel Islands a few weeks ago, the HAIL meeting, and kind of reflecting on that and how it does or does not relate to the conversations going on at OLC today. So I'll see some of you in a little while.
Thank you so much, Michael, and good luck on your session. I'll be going to class for that one. And we'll stay on for a few minutes here. One thing we could look at, I know Bonnie Stakoviak with her podcast just recently got a sponsor to jump in, and they're transcribing all 200 episodes of her podcast.
Oh, that's
I think we need something like that, where we got to get some kind of entity to step up and help us with that, because we don't have the money in the virtual connecting side.
Yes, and so we tried to do it just in the community, and that's when Brittany and Rebecca, and so they kind of got us caught up to a certain point, but we have not been able to keep up with it. So yeah, we need like a cohort of folks who want to jump in and take that on as a project. And that's one of the things about virtually connecting. You know, it started off with 2 people, and it's grown so much, and so trying to keep up with it without any money is difficult sometimes. Ken, I think we're actually gonna maybe head out because they're gonna use the same physical space.
Yep. I'll let you wrap up there, and then I'll let people jump in with last comments here before we wrap up this session, and then we'll let Michael jump on his, which will start live to the internet in about 25 minutes, so we technically still have time ourselves. Thank you so much, Autumn. Good sending you hugs, and hopefully I'll see you in person again sometime soon.
Yeah, see ya.
So pretty much open mic. Anyone want to kind of have some more thoughts on that discussion we've had so far?
I'm going to, let's see, leave it open to see if my students have any questions or thoughts they want to jump in with. But otherwise, I would say carry on the conversation, and we'll stay another few minutes, and then we get back to what I already warned them about. They get to do reflections and thoughts about metacognition and things like that, you know, that have to do with this session. But
for you, George, there's in Virtually Connecting Community, we do have a uni collaboration event coming up on 25th of April out of Prague. And I know Teresa asked if I had some of my students from here in Mexico that would be interested in connecting with students worldwide. And I've got at least a couple. So if they're interested in that kind of what we do here and what they're seeing happening here, doing the same with students around the world, definitely touch base with you or me, and I'll try to connect them with that.
Okay, yeah, I'll remind my class, but I know that several people visibly left like 6 inches out of their chairs when you said where you were. So I think there might be some interest in some interaction.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos. Podemos hablar en español también.
So,
it's the Canadian guy who speaks Spanish.
Yeah, there is that. Canadians are nice. It's cool.
Oh, yeah.
I've been down here for 23 years.
Yeah. But you still talk to Bonnie and, you know, and Dave and whatever, right? So,
right.
So I know that that connection has always remained there for you. So yeah. So does anybody know what day of the week the 25th is? Because we might want to do a little coordination.
I want to say that's a Tuesday, Thursday.
Is it a Thursday?
It's a Wednesday.
Oh, it's a Wednesday. It's a Wednesday. So that means it's for my class, it's a volunteer basis at whatever time the thing happens. So we'll need to share links, that kind of stuff. I can certainly share that with the class, and then.
Yeah, the blog post isn't up yet. It's in Prague, so who knows how the time zone's going to work out. But if they're interested at all, go for it. We do crazy schedules. I wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to do these sometimes. This is part of our life of virtually connecting.
Yeah, half of us are still up at 4 a.m. anyway, trying to catch a nap before.
Well, that's their normal schedule.
So we're good with that. Okay, so we are going to thank you all for participating and with us, or allowing us to join you today. And is there anything else anybody out there in the session wants to add before my class bails out and we do a couple of other things? Anything you guys want to add for my class?
Gregory, Susan, Risa, Nate. I just want to say thanks. I love when we can get some students on these sessions. This is so important for us.
Yeah, I was going to say thanks too. Thanks, George, for bringing the students and for all of y'all's interest in virtually connecting and in what kind of connections you use. That was awesome.
Thanks, Clarissa.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And
awesome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye, and see you in the future.
Bye.
See you on the back swing there.
Sweet. Any thoughts? Even Susan, this is your first virtually connecting session with us, so It feels to me like not a normal one, because usually we kind of have an on-site person. We have a real focus on what our discussion's going to be about. It's often about what just happened in a keynote, or what's the buzz going on in the conference, and trying to pull us into it. I talked a little bit in the side channel about when we connect virtually, it's difficult because I'm running around teaching my class and my boss grabs me, and it's hard to be there when you're not there. Other than closing my blinds and my lights and telling people not to knock on my door. It's hard to have that same feeling. I don't know how to get that back.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I have enjoyed attending the conference virtually for me personally, but I was given time to just attend the conference by my supervisor and director. So for me, I've got my 2 screens set up. I'm able to take notes. I'm able to watch, the presentation. I would have liked to have seen the actual presenter instead of just the slides. I know there was one that I did attend where I actually saw the presenter and the slides, but I enjoyed connecting with Zoom. For me, it felt like I was at the table and talking with people. So that was fine for me.
It'd be great if you can blog or put that out somehow, your experience, and I'm sure OLC would like that. A lot of the community would like to kind of think about how we can do a better job connecting people virtually to events. I've done a few on both sides, and it's a really hard problem to wrap our heads around. Cool. Greg, Nate, or Nate's just typing?
Yeah, I think what occurs to me when I was listening to Michael, you're missing the bluegrass and the Thai food with the conferences, and I guess a lot of people, when they talk about the benefits of a conference, you talk about meeting people and connecting and creating new relationships, and how can that be facilitated through virtual participation? I was surprised to hear that Susan had some interaction in the virtual conference that she participated in, because it seems like that's a big issue, and I hope there's some people can come up with some ideas to create those opportunities.
Yeah, I did a couple with our Flip Learning conferences in the past, a few years back, and it was really important to provide the infrastructure and inform the speaker or the people that were on site that this is actually happening, and don't forget about those people that are connecting to us virtually, and make sure you include them, because we noticed some presenters who weren't really clued into that forgot to include the virtual audience. So I think that is important, and hopefully you got that experience, Susan.
I think in conferences that I've attended that have tried to do something like that, maybe like have a presenter, like a virtual presenter, there's still the technological issues of bad connection, and those kind of things I think are going to continue to make virtual participation difficult.
And even if it gets at any scale, even what we're doing now with virtually connecting, ideally what we try to do is watch the Twitter feed as it's going on, and maybe Nate's actually doing that or someone's doing that. But when I get drawn into this conversation, I got a screen over here and I could be watching the Twitter feed and any questions going on, but you need kind of a producer as well as a host. And so you got to kind of have some person power set up to make that happen.
Well, and when we do the first time I'm diving into this past virtually connecting is this summer when I'm doing this, we're doing a kind of a symposium that's both virtual and in-person audience, and virtual and in-person presenters. And it's the first time we've ever done something like that. And it's it's a collaboration between the Royal Society and us at ACS. And it's going to be difficult. We have 2 symposium organizers, and usually I'm live tweeting the entire session. So in the midst of live tweeting the entire session, I also have to look at all of the questions, and that person needs to make sure that the technical difficulties it's going to be almost, one of those exhausting experiences that you can just tell you're going to need a drink afterwards or whatever you tend to do to wind down. But it just is one of those moments that I'm like, this is going to be crazy, because my biggest annoyance in the midst of these virtual moments, because I've done several meetings and such, is that if everyone isn't online, If you're the virtual people in the midst of a meeting or some kind of session or something, if the person leading the meeting isn't good at it, they won't pay attention to the chat. They won't pay attention to the other things that you have to say. And that gets super annoying very quickly. It feels like you're kind of lurking and not really participating.
Right. You're in the balcony, but all by yourself with no one to turn to with a snarky comment.
Right. Right. Except the other people who are virtually there too, which may be
and that's
just
kind of what Laura was saying, but we're all in our own little snarky comment room. Some of us are on Twitter, maybe someone's in Slack, and
right.
It's difficult, I think. But I do much appreciate the fact that we do have access to this and we didn't before.
I absolutely agree. And I kind of found the interesting comment here was, would the virtual conference benefit from being in a centralized space? I hadn't really ever thought of that. Because I just assumed we'd do everything through Twitter and Facebook and whatever, and trying to meet all of these mediums or platforms is overwhelming. Yeah. So I think that for me is really a piece of, how are we going to make this work exactly?
Right. All right. Well, Nate's not going to jump in. He's tired of hearing his own voice. I like to hear your voice, sir.
I like Nate.
and does a good job virtual buddying. So I think I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time. Remember, we do virtually connecting at many of these events. And I thank everyone who did join us for their time joining this one. If you're interested in more virtually connecting or seeing what we do, please check out the site, virtuallyconnecting.org. And if you're saying there should be virtually connecting presence at this event I'm going to be at, well, talk to us and help us make it happen. And I'll sign out for today. And where's my button? There's the stop broadcast button. Thank you, everyone.